This is Alternative Political Analysis, and this video will be on race and human biological diversity. And the reason for this is that certain people, despite biological evidence to the contrary, insist that human races and human biological diversity are merely social constructs to oppress certain sections of the working class. And in this video, I will explain to you concisely why that is nonsense and will not help all working class people with socialism. So let's get on to facts about race and human biological diversity. And the first is cranial and facial features differences between races is 10 times greater than the corresponding differences between the two genders. In terms of fixation index statistics, the genetic differences between European Aryans and West African Bantu are 2 times as great as the differences between chimpanzees and bonobos, 6 times the differences between the species of gorillas, 3 times the difference between Homo sapiens sapien and Homo sapien neanderthal, and it is more than the difference between Homo sapiens sapien and Homo erectus. However, despite those facts, said populations can produce fertile offspring. Thus, they are not classified as different species or different subspecies according to Haldane's rule. And the average fixation index statistics between dog breeds is the same as the average differences between human gene pools. And there are strong positive correlations in genetic physical traits in certain human gene pools. And the source for that is a study by Q Ayub in 2003. And this brings us on to the subject of cross-progenation. Aryan and Oriental people are twice as likely to be depressed and abuse substances. Aryan and African people engage in more antisocial adolescent behavior than Africans or Aryans raised in similar environments. And leukotriene A4 hydrolase has been identified as the heart attack gene, and it increases African Americans' chances of heart attacks by 250% and increases Narians' chances of a heart attack by 16%, and 30% of Aryans have genes that counteract LTA4H. Most African Americans do not. In fact, only 6% of African Americans have the genes to counteract LTA4H. And it should be pointed out that heterogeneous marriages have half of the success rate of homogeneous marriages. And Robert D. Putnam of Harvard University showed heterogeneity strongly and positively correlates with less confidence in local government and less political efficacy. It correlates strongly and positively with lower voter turnout and more protests, less community cohesion and cooperation, less friends, lower happiness, lower life quality, less charity, less volunteering, more television watching, lower trust, lower altruism, and greater ethnic cohesion. And African Americans with a higher amount of European Aryan DNA have a higher bell curve average IQ than African Americans with lower amounts of European Aryan DNA. In comparison to Aryans, Africans have a more robust crania, simpler crania, a lower cephalic index, more rectangular eye sockets, more sloped forehead, wider nasal index, less nasal prominence, more joined nasal bones, a higher rate of subnasal prognathism, more prominent mandible, lower facial angles, more rectangular palates, larger teeth, more widely spaced, less spinal curvature, shorter spines, and longer arms and longer legs. And as I said, Africans have smaller crania than Aryans, and the long, narrow skulls of Africans are better at dissipating heat, where the more spherical skulls of Aryans retain heat better. And this is because Africans evolved in the warm climates of Africa, and Aryans evolved in cold European and Asian climates. And high-income African Americans have a lower bell curve average IQ than lower-income European Aryans in the United States of America. And Aryans who were brought up in the same environment as Aryan African mixed race people and African Americans have bell curve average IQs as follows: Aryans 109, mixed race 99, African Americans 89, and as I've previously mentioned, lighter complexioned African Americans score higher on IQ tests. Aryans and Africans have never ever scored equal on IQ tests. African adolescents have higher self-esteem than Aryan adolescents, despite an on average lower academic achievement. Microcephaly is common in Europeans and Asians, but absent in Africans. Heritability is 80% for Aryans and 72% for African Americans. And the average Aryan brain is 123 grams heavier than the African or the average African brain, I beg your pardon. Africans absorb 30% more nicotine from a cigarette than Aryans do. Aryan women have wider hips. Africans having thinner hips makes them faster sprinters, hence the Olympics. There is a strong positive correlation between brain mass and IQ in humans to a degree of 77%. Based on donations of money, blood, and organs, Aryans are the most altruistic race. Sickle cell anemia and the Duffy antigen are found only in Africans. People with AVPR1 allele are more altruistic. African Americans have greater intra-ethnicity empathy than European Americans. The MAOAL gene is the warrior gene. A third of Aryans have it. 59% of Africans have it. And violent crime rates are 15 times higher in Africa than in Europe. There is a strong positive correlation between high violent crime rates and areas of America with a high percentage of African Americans or a high percentage of Hispanics, and this is to a degree of 81%. And the correlation between violent crime and poverty in the United States is much weaker at 36%. The Caribbean and Southern Africa have the world's highest murder rates as regions. Zimbabwe went from being Africa's top grain exporter to being unable to feed half the country's population. It has the world's lowest life expectancy, 34 years old for women and 37 years old for men, and it has the highest percentage of orphans amongst the population than any other country in the world. "85% to 90% of genetic variation is within groups of people. However, the 10% to 15% between groups of people is significant. Scientists can identify a person's race by their teeth and their dental bacteria. And people can be categorized in the following broad race groups. And the first broad race group is Caucasian, and they can be broadly categorized as Aryans, Semites, and Hamites. The next broad race group is Africans, who can be broadly categorized as Bantu, Khoi, Melanesian, Australasian, and Southeast Asian pygmies. And this brings us on to Mongols, or the Oriental race, and these can be broadly categorized as Mongolian, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Tibetan, Malaysian, Polynesian, Maori, Micronesian, Eskimo, and American. And this brings us on to the Hunnic peoples, and they are cross-progenites from Aryan and Mongol cross-progenation. And Aryans in Europe alone can be broadly categorized as Nordic, Alpine, Baltic, Adriatic, and Mediterranean. It is unclear what Dravidian people and Sinhalese people are in terms of broad racial groups, and I will give you the bell curve average IQs, and they are as follows: East Asian 105, Occidental European Aryan 99, Arctic 91, Southeast Asian 87, Maori 90, Pacific Islander 85, American 86, West and Southeast, or West and South Asia region 84, West Asia 89, South Asia 82, Africa 67, Bantu 71, African Caucasian 85, Khoisan 54, Australian 62, and the world average is 90. And I would recommend that viewers subscribe to the Alternative Political Analysis YouTube channel and check out the channel, the blog, and the Facebook page for more interesting posts and videos, including on this subject.